Hello and welcome along to today's video. We're going to discuss squish in two-stroke engines. What is squish? How do we measure it? How does it affect things? Let's take a look. So what exactly is squish? I've got a cylinder head here and I've got a piston. Squish is the distance between the piston and the cylinder head when the piston is at top dead centre, which is the very top of the cylinder. Just going to do a little drawing here, show you what it's like inside the engine. So this is the bit we're actually measuring. What happens as the piston comes up, the air that's trapped in this area gets pushed towards the combustion chamber. Today we're going to talk about setting the squish. Now the squish is the height between the top of the piston and the squish band angled area on the cylinder head. So to do this, we're going to get the piston somewhere near the top of the cylinder. We're going to put a piece of 2mm solder wire across. Now this is the front of the engine, so we're going to put the solder going left to right on the engine so it's in line with the gudgeon pin. We're then going to put the cylinder head on, put on the 4 washers, put on the 4 cylinder head nuts. I'm going to use 18 Newton meters. So we're going to torque these up and make sure that all of them are down before we actually do any of them fully tight. That way we know we're pulling the cylinder head down straight and it's sitting square relative to the cylinder. So again, I'll do diagonal pattern as I'm doing that to make sure that the cylinder head's down square and not pulled off one side. Not the easiest thing to do without telling the engine. So now we've got that down. If we look down through the spark plug hole, you can see the solder wire is there. It's at this going across the centre of the piston. Then we're going to rotate the engine using the rotor on the ignition side. We're going to fit the spanner onto the nut and we're going to turn it so that it goes just over top dead center, and this is compressing the solder wire. We're going to rock backwards and forwards either side of top dead center a few times. That will have compressed the solder between the cylinder head and the piston. Then we take the cylinder head back off. If the engine's cold, it doesn't actually matter very much. If the engine's hot, you can put extra stress on the cylinder head and make it slightly warped. Then we lift off the cylinder head. That leaves our solder wire. Now you can see here that the solder wire has been compressed. Try and focus slightly better here. There you can see it's being compressed, which has squashed the solder wire out in this direction. Turn it sideways, you can see the thin and thick section. So then we take our vernier calipers, make sure they're zeroed when they're closed, and then we measure across here. So this currently the squish is set at 0.76 at the tightest section. The tightest section will always be to the outside of the piston. So there you can see I'm measuring at the very end of the solder. If I move up towards the center of the piston, you'll see, looking at the measurement, that it gets larger. That's because the squish gap, you always have a different angle on the top of the cylinder head to the angle that's on the top of the piston, because the idea of the squish is to push the fuel towards the center of the piston, towards the spark plug and the combustion chamber. So as we can see, we are currently at 0.75. Check the opposite side, make sure that's the same or very similar. 0.7675. So yep, that's the same. That's good because it means that the cylinder head is square relative to the bore. If you had a bigger number on this side than you had on this side, that would indicate that the cylinder head is not flat across here, because you'd have a bigger gap one side than on the other side. We're targeting on this engine a 0.85mm squish, so I have already prepared a copper head shim. This particular copper head shim is 0.10mm, so that should get our squish to where we want it. Now we could, knowing that what the measurement was before we had the shim, we could just add the shim value and do that, but we're going to remeasure it. So we're going to take some more wire, we're going to put it across. We sit that going across the cylinder from left to right again. Then we're going to refit the cylinder head, refit the washers and refit the nuts and torque it down, and we're going to measure again. Rotate the crankshaft so that the piston is going just over top dead center, backwards and forwards a few times to compress the solder wire. And then we take the cylinder head off again. Solder has stuck itself to the cylinder head, that's not a problem. And then check that our calipers are a 0 again, which they are, and then we'll measure again. So on the furthest 0.86, and then we'll turn the wire around and measure the other side, although we've already checked that its cylinder head is flat and square, and again 0.86. Now we were targeting 0.85 on this engine, so the measurement of 0.86 is as close as we're going to get. Now that we know we have the correct shim value here, I'll just pop that out. As you can see, we've already got the cylinder head O-ring here. Not all engines have an O-ring there. Pretty much all water-cooled engines will have an O-ring there. Some of the air-cooled engines do, some do not. Now, you'll notice, because this is a water-cooled engine, we now need to fit the O-rings onto the studs here, and we need to fit the O-ring around the outside. My O-rings here, I've got the big O-ring to go around there, and then I've got 4 O-rings to go over the studs. Now, I like to put a little bit of red rubber grease on these as I'm fitting them. There's 2 reasons for this. Firstly, it helps to keep the O-ring in situ, so it stops it from falling out of the slot, moving around. And the other reason is because it prevents the O-ring from getting caught, getting pulled, moving as we're pulling the cylinder head down onto it, and then we can fit our cylinder head for the final time. So we'll drop this down. Pop the washers on. And then we can do our cylinder head. There we go. And then again, we'll put these back down. So now we've got the squish set on this engine, it's time to move on to the next stage, which is fitting the rest of the ignition system, the stator on the side, the coil on the front. We've already done a video on that. Check that out by clicking the link up the top here. It doesn't matter if you're setting the squish on a water-cooled engine or on an air-cooled engine. The process is exactly the same. If we turn the cylinder head on this one over, it's exactly the same arrangement. Look at the top of the cylinder, it's exactly the same. This air-cooled engine does have an O-ring here. You generally find the IAME engines are fitted with an O-ring here, but Rotax, for example, certainly didn't come out the factory with an O-ring groove in that position. So I've pulled a few different cylinder heads together here. We've got a Perilla cylinder head here from a TT38 rotary valve engine, but it's actually the same base head as used on a Perilla Reed jet air-cooled engine. Over this side, we've got a cylinder head that's actually from a 100cc piston port engine, so this was a Jicker engine. It's actually the same base casting, but you'll see there's quite a difference in the size of the combustion chamber. The Reed and rotary valve version has a much smaller combustion chamber than the piston port Jicker version. Now this has a bigger combustion chamber, not for performance reasons, but from regulations. At the time there was a minimum combustion chamber volume, so that's why this has a bigger combustion chamber volume. It can be done, and I've done a few of these, that you can weld up and then recut the combustion chamber on a lathe to be able to use one of these heads in place of one of these heads on a rotary or Reed valve engine. At the back here we have a Rotax cylinder head from a Rotax 100cc Reed or rotary valve engine. Again, it's the same base casting. It's machined in a way that they are interchangeable, although between rotary and Reed you don't necessarily run the same squish angle machined onto the cylinder head. You don't necessarily have the same combustion chamber volume, but they can all be adjusted. So as we can see, the angle of the piston crown here, we have a slightly different angle of the cylinder head here. That can be varied to change the performance, but we're only talking about a difference in angle between the cylinder head and the piston crown of 2, 3, 4 degrees.